Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. And I know that you know we're on hiatus for the summer, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get amazing content. So I'm going to share with you some interviews I did with some of the women in Ladies Who Leverage. We had an amazing series called What's the Tea during Women's History Month, where we talked about things from self-care to women in work to empowerment and also about relationships. So I'm going to share those with you so that you have some amazing new content. You're going to find that the ladies had some great strategies and tips and tactics for navigating the world as women. So I hope you enjoy this series. And again, if you want to know more about Ladies Who Leverage, we are a global network of diverse women who collaborates to leverage our influence, to increase our income, and create impact so we can live life unapologetically AF. You can always go to ladieswholeverage.com to learn more or join us in our Facebook group. So for now, I want you to enjoy this series. It was our What's the Tea series. I want you to enjoy that. We talked about self-care. We talked about women in work. We talked about empowerment, and we talked about relationships. And as always, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And please leave a review and share it with your network. Bye for now. Welcome to our What's the Tea series. It is real conversations, real women, and it's in celebration of Women's History Month, and it's sponsored by Ladies Who Leverage. I'm your moderator, Kelly Charles Collins. I'm also the host of Ladies Who Leverage podcast and the founder and CEO of Ladies Who Leverage, which is a global women's community that empowers women to leverage their expertise, resources, and relationships to build their business, brand, and badassery. I'm also a retired attorney that companies now hire to empower their leaders and employees to stay on the right side of the next hashtag movement. And I do that by training them on unconscious bias, bystander intervention, and courageous conversations. I'm also an author and a TEDx speaker. So I want to welcome everyone today, everyone who's live with us in what I'll call the studio on Zoom, and everyone who's watching us live on Facebook. For those of you who are with us in studio, if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box and we will answer those towards the end of our show today. If you're on Facebook, type it in Facebook. Hopefully we can get over to Facebook and be able to see the questions that you have. But before we get into the show and what we're talking about today, our topic today is health and wellness. Self-care isn't selfish. And joining me for that discussion are some amazing women. So these women are not just women that I know off the street. These are my Ladies Who Leverage sisters, and they're my investors, and one of them is my actual sister. So I'm going to introduce you to all of them, and I'm going to read their bios because I want you to hear all about them. So I'm going to start with my real sister. Her name is Lisa. So with over 30 years as a financial executive and over 20 years as a peak performance leadership and mindset coach, Lisa Charles has coached entrepreneurs, me included, to successfully start up and run their businesses while maintaining a quality of life that is aligned with and supports their ability to include what matters most in their life. And I can attest to all of that. So practicing what she preaches, she has done all of this while being a single parent with a daughter who is completing her first year in law school, following in my footsteps. I'm very happy about that, Miss Danielle. We're rooting for you. So next, we have Dr. Paulette Hubbard. So Paulette is a healer, advocate, author, international trainer, founder, and the CEO of Inspired Wholeness LLC. These women are badasses, I'm telling you. Wait till you hear about the rest of them. So then we have Chanel Evans. So Chanel is a social media strategist. She works with savvy women business owners to quickly scale to multiple 6 and 7 figures with her SEC strategic social media systems. She's also a wife, a mom of 3, and lives in Northern Virginia. And next, we have Claudia Jean Verga. Claudia is the creator of the Chat Communication Methodology, a communication method that helps nonprofit organizations maximize their services and resources. Claudia Jean has over 30 years of experience working with nonprofit organizations. Claudia Jean has been in front of the camera as a TV host and behind the camera as an award-winning producer. That's something new that I learned about Claudia in this. She is a 2-time TEDx speaker and was very instrumental in helping me to determine what my TEDx was going to be about, and is featured on TED.com. She's a TEDx curator, and she has coached hundreds of TEDx speakers from all over the world. So then we have Geraldine Hogan. Geraldine I've known for many, many years outside of Ladies Who Leverage. So Geraldine is a retired judge of compensation claims for the state of Florida. She's also certified by the Florida Supreme Court as a circuit court mediator, and she currently focuses her legal practice on mediating workers' compensation claims. Now we have Miss Laura D. Harver. Laura is the innovative solutionista and founder and CEO of Sisters United, Tea Talk, and Harver Edge. She is a professional certified coach, certified image consultant, corporate trainer, professional speaker, and poet. She's amazing, y'all. She's just really amazing. She serves women like you who want to rock their stilettos while feeling good and developing their legacy. Love it. Love it. And last but certainly not least, we have Miss Dr. Leslie Rogers, who has a PsyD in clinical psychology. She was formerly employed with the VA Medical Center in North Carolina, where she specialized in treating veterans with a wide range of mental health concerns and complex trauma histories. So very, very, hard job that she was doing. Dr. Rogers is the host of Mental Health Talk and Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers. Both of those air on Facebook, so please don't miss them on Thursdays. And Dr. Rogers is working on becoming a fully licensed psychologist in the state of North Carolina. So that's all these amazing, amazing women who we are going to have these conversations with. So now What's the Tea was an idea that I came up with for all of us to just have conversations around issues that impact women personally and professionally. So this week, we are going to be talking about self-care and why self-care isn't selfish. We have 3 other episodes that will happen every Friday in March. So make sure that you register at thetea.live so that you don't miss any of the episodes. We'll be talking about work, we'll be talking about empowerment, and we're going to talk about relationships. So make sure that you sign up. But today, we're focused on self-care. So ladies, we always hear people talking about self-care. We should practice self-care. But what exactly is self-care? So Claudia, if I asked you, what does self-care mean to you? What does that mean?
Well, Kelly, wow, you just started right with me.
You're like right in my line of sight.
I thought maybe we could warm up a little bit, but okay. I think self-care is determined by each individual person, and what brings you joy and brings you rest and actually re-energize you. And so, for instance, if working out at the gym for 3 hours a day is what I consider self-care, but you might not, that might be torture for you, right? So it's about finding what floats your boat, makes you happy and brings you joy, and that you can unplug from everything else and spend time on those things so that you can do the other things that we have to do, like work and take care of kids or whatever else is going on in your life, that you can do that with better focus.
Lisa, how would you define self-care?
Very similar to Claudia. Self-care is that thing that gives you a sense of peace, a sense of nurturing, but it's also the ability to put yourself first without that sense of guilt. It's the permission to do what's important for you without having to feel like it's going to cost you in your relationships with other people. or other organizations. So generally, that's what I would say it is.
Thank you. And Dr. Paulette, why don't you jump in and tell us what you think? What's your definition of self-care?
Hello, everybody. It's mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. We sometimes we have a tendency to neglect one and focus on the other, or neglect all three while we're focused on everybody else. And so it's important to maintain that balance of mental care, making sure that you're doing the things that you like to do, like the other panelists have already talked about, doing those things that are fun and relaxing for you. Spiritual, whatever your spiritual walk is, and wherever you are in your belief about spirituality, not religion, but spiritual, making sure that balance is there. And then physical health. Sometimes that's a challenge for all of us, or for some of us, or most of us, but also making sure that you're taking care of yourself physically.
Anyone else have something else you want to add to that? Something, a little bit of a twist? Anybody want to jump in?
This is Chanel. I would say for me, it's really about just the self-care piece of it. A lot of times I feel like women think that self-care has to be like very grand, is a trip to the spa, or a trip to the hair salon, or just a retreat. But it can really be as simple as taking 5 minutes to get up and get away from your computer, or treating yourself to a bubble bath after a hard day's work. So a lot of times I find that self-care gets neglected because we think that we have to schedule this large grand thing, but it really can be incorporated into our daily life.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. I know I'm going to bring Leslie in a second, because I do want to talk about what are those specifics, right? When we're talking about self-care, what are some of the specific things? But Dr. Leslie, with regards to defining self-care, what do you say about that? Leslie, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying that, yes, self-care is basically, like everyone said, about taking care of yourself, about putting yourself first, and about being both mindfully, both mentally and physically, right? It's an important part of overall well-being. It helps to improve quality of life. Without self-care, then we become at risk for stressors, high stresses, chronic stress, and other physiological symptoms, which we'll talk about later. But self-care is basically that, being able to take care of yourself in such a way that makes you feel good, right? Makes you feel good. And it is individualistic, Claudia. It's what I do for self-care. Claudia might do something else, or Lisa or Kelly may do something else, but it's whatever. It could range from sitting in my chair eating a bowl of ice cream, to treating myself to something nice outside, to going to the gym. And I want to make sure I say this too. Self-care can also include going to therapy and being mentally, cared for, taking medications as prescribed, medically. You can engage in self-care too, which is really important. Oftentimes people don't think that, going to therapy is self-care, or medication is self-care. So that's.
Yeah. And I'm going to have you, especially, that's why I wanted to have you and Dr. Paulette, because I know that mental health is your specialty. And I think that that's so very important that we talk about that, because there's a stigma related to mental health that causes us sometimes to not want to engage in that type of self-care for fear of whatever. So I really want to get you two in on that when we get to that part of the discussion. And Laura, I want to bring you in because I want you to explain to everyone, why is self-care so important? We know what it is, right? We know it's putting ourselves first, but why is that so important?
That is a great question. Thank you for having me and for this great topic. Self-care is so important because I think of a mask on approach. And most of us have heard that when you put your mask on, you're able to help other people. And they usually use that analogy on an airplane, that you can't help someone first, even if someone that you care for, if you're passed out or if you're not able to. So it's important for you to put your mask on first. I would also say self-care also relates to your success, because when you're depleted and you're giving from a broken cup or a cup that's halfway full, you're not giving from your full self. So it's important to nurture and take care of yourself. And I also think of self-care as honoring you and what you want out of your life. So how can you make the impact that you want if you're not owning who you are and what you want? And oftentimes people think of service first, that I'm here to serve people. Yes, you're here to serve people, but before you're here to serve people, you're here to be. And out of you being authentic in who you are, then you could serve versus not being true to who you are. And that energizes you, and it's important to honor you.
Yeah. I always say that you can't be anything to yourself, and anything to anyone else until you're everything to yourself. So that kind of goes with what you were just saying, Claudia. And Geraldine, I want to bring you in on this one. Why is it so important to engage in self-care?
One of the things that I thought about, and I don't want to reiterate what other people have already said, but I think it's really important to understand that we take ourselves into everything that we do, whether it's work, whether it's our responsibilities with our families, whether it's being involved with social activities. So until we're able to take care of ourselves, then we're not able to function well in those other areas of our life.
And Lisa, what's your thought on this?
I think one of the things that we have to focus on for ourselves is that we are the ones that get to say how our life is going to go. And when we give up that ability to have that voice about your own quality of life, then you're at the effect of other people. And that depletes rather than fuels our energy. And I think that's where a lot of the stress, and I'm sure that, Dr. Paulette and Dr. Leslie will talk more about it. But I think that that's where a lot of the stress is coming at you from externally, because you're responding to circumstances and you feel like you've lost power rather than the ability to own your power. And I think, like Laura was saying, to know yourself and to have, to be clear about what is important to you so that you can then give voice to what you will agree to participate in and what you won't.
Yeah. And, when we talk about self-care, so there's the benefits to self-care and there are the consequences of not engaging in self-care. And so I want to bring this question to Dr. Leslie and Dr. Paulette to talk about what is the impact positively on us and also negatively in not engaging in self-care. And then Chanel, I'm going to bring you in on this one too. But I want to start with Dr. Leslie on this question. What are some of the benefits or the negative impacts in not engaging in self-care?
All right, let's start with the negative impacts first. Well, empirically, research shows that self-care improves the quality of life by decreasing stress, right? Stress, we can have healthy stress, right? Healthy stresses, or we can have those bad stressors where, we get overwhelmed, we get stressed out, chronically stressed, and that does your body bad. Medically, it places you at risk for heart disease, stroke, hypertension. Psychologically, it places you at risk for depression, anxiety, and irritability, anger, right? When we get stressed, where our mood starts to change. Physiologically, anxiety symptoms, gastrointestinal symptoms. So it puts harm on your body when you're chronically stressed. So the benefits of engaging in self-care is to have a strategic plan in place to help you counter stress and counter those physiological symptoms that you often, let me tell you, and it also impacts memory and learning.
Yeah.
Memory and attention. Let me tell you,
Absolutely.
Have you ever been so stressed that you forget something? I remember working and leaving the office in Virginia, going to Maryland, and left my purse at the office and drove all the way home to Maryland. And that's when I realized my purse was in Virginia, right? So being stressed, it also impacts memory and attention as well. So the good thing is, when you put together a plan in place to counter that, such as relaxation, mindfulness meditation, right? Music or things that calm you, your body, our bodies automatically go back to a resting state, right? Physiologically, our bodies are programmed to go back to a normal resting state. When we're stressed, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? When we're stressed, it doesn't go back. So self-care helps our body to calm and it teaches us tools to like help our body. You know, when you have panic attacks, you grounding techniques and stuff like that, it helps us learn tools of how to calm ourselves and relax.
And you just said two things that brought together two concepts that are really interesting in terms of what we think about in our daily lives of how we take care of our businesses. So you're talking about strategic planning and really alignment, right? And we think about those things in terms of, oh, we got to get our business together. We got to make sure this is aligned with what we do. We have to have a strategic plan, but not thinking about that in terms of our own personal health and well-being. So I love that you brought that in. And Dr. Paulette, I want to bring you in because you're also an expert in mental health, and talk to us about the impact and, you know, how does this positively benefit us to engage in self-care and negatively impact us when we don't?
To sum it all up, and what the panel has been saying is that if you're not 100%, you can't give 100%. So that's something that we need to keep in the forefront of our mind when we talk about being taking care of ourselves as opposed to being selfish. It's selfish when you can't give 100%, and especially when you need to show up in a way that you need to be 100%. And when we talk about let's talk about how stress and not taking care of yourself, in addition to what Dr. Leslie also talked about, sleep is a big one. We take sleep for granted. And sleep is a huge, in my practice, I have a lot of people that come to me, clients that come to me that are, they think they're suffering from depression. The thing about sleep and depression is that they don't mimic the same symptoms. They are the exact same symptoms. So if you're that person that suffers from insomnia, or you stay up all hours of the night and you're not getting adequate sleep, and then you start to feel a little low, one of the goals that I do with my clients is making sure that we get them on a regular sleep cycle first. So sleep is huge in it. And when we sleep, it also allows our body to repair itself. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. Nutrition, and I'm adding to what Dr. Leslie talked about. Diet and nutrition, I know. We hear it all the time. We hear, we need to eat right, we need to, but there really is scientific proof to nutrition. And there are certain foods that you can eat if you're suffering from depression. There's certain foods that you can eat that will help increase your melatonin level and help to calm your central nervous system to help you sleep better. If you're suffering from depression, the same thing, and the same with anxiety. So those are things that, to add what Dr. Leslie said, that we need to keep in mind as we move forward in taking care of ourselves. And our mental health, I can't tell you how many clients I have come to me that are suffering from, they ended up in the emergency room thinking they were having a heart attack, and it turned out to be a panic attack because they're not taking time to manage themselves. And just like Dr. Leslie said, it could be very brief. I want to do a really, really quick exercise, Kelly, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So first I want everybody to take a deep breath. I just want to see the panel take a deep breath. Yeah, a slow, deep breath. There you go. Like Kelly just did. That's perfect, Kelly.
I'm a good student, don't you know? I'm like the A student.
And so that's one thing, taking slow, deep breaths. And there's different breathing exercises that you can Google and do that will help, because when you take slow, deep yoga breaths, if you do yoga, you're familiar with the diaphragmatic breathing. Those things, that helps to calm the nerve, calm the other organs, and just helps your body to calm down. But I want to go a little bit further. I want to do a really quick visualization exercise. So if everybody would take a deep breath and exhale. And now I want you to think about a moment in time, a moment in nature, just one moment in nature that you were just awestruck. That moment where you were like, oh, all is right with the world. Everything was at peace. Everything was calm. And if you have more than one moment in nature, and just a simple moment in nature, I don't want you to think about before or after, just that moment in nature. If you have more than one, pick one. And now I want you to take another slow, deep breath. And as you exhale, close your eyes. Bring up that moment in nature, and I want you to focus on that moment in nature, whether it was at the beach, in the mountains, at the zoo, wherever you were in that moment in time, where that scenery in the mountains, on the beach, at the park, where you were just right with the world. Everything was peaceful. Everything was calm. Look around. Remember the sights. Remember the smells. Remember the sounds, the calming sounds. And as you visualize that moment in nature, feel your body relax. Feel the ripples of relaxation flowing down from your neck, your shoulders, down through your body as you visualize that moment in nature. Remembering what it felt like, remembering those sounds, the feeling, the sights, the smells. And just stay there for a second and hang out, visualizing that moment in nature now. Feeling the calm, the peace, the tranquility, the relaxation in that moment in nature. And then whenever you're ready, take a deep breath. Feel your body in the weight of the chair or on the bed or whatever's supporting your body right now. And take another deep breath. And open your eyes. Just that simple. Did anybody feel a difference?
It just calms you.
Just that simple. And so you can do that. So when we talk about self-care, that's just you can do that sitting at your desk. You can do that, and so it's just having those small techniques that you can incorporate throughout your day that help to recenter you and helps to calm and relax you. I have a client that does that exercise, and they set their watch now. They'll set for an hour in case they fall asleep, because she gets to the point where she'll fall asleep when she's doing it. So that's just one example of being able to find techniques and tools to be able to incorporate into your regular lifestyle that is practicing self-care.
I love that. And we're going to talk about towards the end, because I'd like to leave everybody, whenever I do anything, any type of training or speaking, I like to leave people with actionable things that they can do. So towards the end, we'll go around and I want everyone to talk about what are the actionable things that we can do. But Chanel, I was going to bring you into that positive, negative conversation. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think Dr. Leslie and Dr. Paulette did an awesome job. Right. And I'm already imagining myself back in Turks. So yeah, they did an awesome job helping me relax.
Come on back,
I don't have anything to add to that.
You're on the
field. All right, I'm going to bring you back. So this question I'm going to pose to you then. We're talking about, being able to show up and being 100%. How is that important to our success when we're talking about self-care? Well, how does that translate into us being successful in business, in our personal lives, professionally, whether we own a business or we're working for someone else? What is the impact of that?
Yeah, well, I think Geraldine touched on it just a bit. Like, we are our business. We are, all the roles that we, encompass, whether it's wife, mother, sister, cheerleader, whatever it is. And in terms of business, if you can't show up authentically as yourself, your business suffers. We can't give 100% of ourselves to our business if we aren't 100% of ourselves. And that means, being depleted with our creative energy and our juices, whether we need to be really sharp in the courtroom, or whether it's, simply if you're, educating kids, you need to be mentally well to be able to do that. So from a business standpoint, absolutely, we need to be able to be ourselves 100%, so that not only can we gain from our business what we want, but so we can deliver 5-star service for our clients as well.
Laura, what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think that was well said.
And nothing else, right? Drop the mic. Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that part of what Chanel was pointing to is the ability to have clear communication as well with people. You literally train people how to engage with you. And you have to have some kind of sense of how you're managing what's important to you, how you're managing your own schedule, so that you can let people know, what's important about how they come to engage with you. Like, if you're running a business and you keep your door open and you let people just come in and walk in and sit down in a chair and gab with you all day because you feel bad about, not letting them talk to you, and then they've just wasted an hour of your time, getting whatever they needed to get off of their chest. And now you're scrambling because now you need to make up for this time that you gave away to somebody else because you don't know how to set that boundary. Then those are kinds of important things. That is part of self-care, particularly in your business. You have to know how to communicate boundaries to people so that they know when and how to interact with you.
Yeah. And, Claudia is the chat communication methodology lady on this stage. And, we talk about saying no. We talk about using our voice and that's part of self-care. But sometimes we think, I shouldn't do that, right? Why is that not a selfish thing? Why is it so important for us to learn to say no?
Are you asking me, Kelly?
Yes, you.
You're all on this platform, right? Like, and it's so, I had to learn the hard way how to say no, because I grew up with, my mom. I heard my mom over and over again, and not intentionally. She didn't know what she was doing, but my mom would say, "I always put you kids first. Your needs came before mine." And so I was growing up thinking I have to put everybody else's needs before mine. And as Lisa was saying, I had no boundaries. It was just like I did for everybody else. Well, you know what? That ended me up on my floor begging for my life to be over because I was in so much pain because and I had so many medical issues from it. And so learning to say no can save you from all the things that Dr. Leslie is talking about and Dr. Paulette are talking about. And, I tell people, listen, if you were having a heart attack and the ambulance came for you, would you have a hard time saying, no, I'm not going to get in. It might be selfish. Somebody else might need the ambulance, right? But in essence, every time that we don't say a no, we put ourselves at risk in some way, shape, or form, because in honoring ourselves is the best sense of self-care that we can do. So owning your no, and I tell people, start with people who love you and say, listen, I'm going to strengthen my no muscle. So sometimes you might ask me to do things and I'm just going to say no just because I have to learn how to say no. Like you can let people know your intention, because some people have a hard time saying the word no, right? If they don't have good boundaries, like we're all talking about. And it's okay. It's perfectly okay. It's actually, once you start doing it, there was a point where the scale tipped. It was no to everything. It was like, ooh, I like this. No. You start talking to me, I'm like, no, so you'll find your balance, right? You go from nothing, saying yes to everything, to no to everything, and then somewhere in between lies your sweet spot. So it's all about getting comfortable and exercising it just like any other muscle.
That's awesome. Geraldine, you want to jump in? And Lisa, I'll come to you afterwards.
I think it's really important. One of the things that Claudia said, because it's hard for so many of us, especially as women, to remember that saying no is not a bad thing, that sometimes if we don't speak up, if we don't say no, and as it pertains to various areas of our lives, especially at work, sometimes when we refuse to say no, we end up not doing our best work. So we're not helping ourselves or the people that we work with or the people that we serve. So I would say definitely amen to everything Claudia just said.
And no is a complete sentence, right?
Absolutely.
A complete sentence. So Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually going to start with that. So no is actually a complete sentence. I think that one of the things that we can really take a hold of is, I think that when people ask us something, we hear it as a demand. And what we can do to flip that is, instead of when someone asks you something, here it as a demand, to actually treat it like a request. Because when there's a request, no, you're in charge. In a demand, they're in charge. In a request, you get to say. So when someone says, can I do this? Then you have actually some different options. In a demand, the answer is either yes or no. In a request, the answer is yes, no, or here's some other options. So when someone comes to you and says, can I do, or can I have, or can we meet? One of the things that I tell Kelly all the time is, he who has the most certainty wins. So if you're really certain about your schedule, and you're really certain about when you can and cannot do anything, and they approach you and you take it as a request, then you're actually able to say, well, that time doesn't really work for me. How about this? Or, I can't really do that, but how about this resource? So it's not, so that you're not left with the no, and you're not left with the guilt of having turned somebody down. You're actually able to say no, and here is something else for you. I think when you begin to train people that way, then when people come towards you, it won't be in this kind of antagonistic, you won't feel that way about it. You feel like there is this relationship of respect between the two of you, so that if you have to tell them no, they're going to get that it really is a no. It's not like you don't want to help them. It's like you really can't help them, or you can't help them at this time. And so that they will continue to move on, and then look for that resource elsewhere, or they will wait. So, that's, again, learning to train people inside of the boundaries of communication, is to just really take it on. Your communication to me, even if for you it's a demand, for me it's a request.
I like that. The reframing of that. I love that. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? I saw and we have a raised hand in the audience.
No, right?
Did you see it? You know who it is, right?
I raised my hand.
Tangi raised her hand, so we'll get to Tangi in a second. Chanel, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna add. I have I like what Lisa said, and one thing that I have trained myself to thinking about in the form of self-care is saying no to someone is a yes to me. So, no, I can't show up at that basketball game tonight because yes, I want to be home, relaxing after a hard day's work. No, I'm not gonna, co-host that clubhouse room because I haven't seen my family and I want to say, yes to doing things like that. So looking at just kind of flipping, because a lot of times we think no is just so negative, no, sounds so rude. But when you frame it in a way of your no is a yes to something that you want to do, then I feel like that makes it a lot easier for you to be able to do it with confidence, but being able to say no with a complete sentence.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. So Tan says she didn't raise her hand. And Wendy King says, let me just read what Wendy King said. So Wendy says, I love that about it as a request. I definitely struggle with that. So hopefully that will help you. And Claudia, did you just raise your hand?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
He raised my hand because I love what Chanel's saying, what Lisa's saying. And for me personally, because no is so difficult to get out of my mouth, my coach actually had me, you tell people no and then not explain it, because then that kind of like, you're like saying no, for me, I'll stick with me, right? My I am statements. So for me, it was like, I would say no. And then I felt like I had to I had to tell them why I said no. So it was really hard for me to learn that I could say no. And I don't like, oh, Kelly, you asked me if I want to go to the movie. No, but thanks for thinking of me. And I didn't have to say no, and that was really challenging for me, but yet also very freeing at the same time. But I love what Lisa said about turning it around into a request rather than a demand. I love that. It was a good takeaway. Thank you.
Go ahead, Miss Leslie, Dr. Leslie.
Oh, you can call me Leslie, girl. So, what I'm hearing is like this theme that is not about saying no to the other person because the other person will be angry, but it's turned inward. It's about me. So I feel uncomfortable saying no. Right. So it's important to understand why we feel uncomfortable saying no as women, as whomever, right? Why we feel uncomfortable saying no. Is it because of guilt, shame, embarrassment, those manufactured emotions? Or is it because we're in environments where we can't say no? A boss comes and give us too much work. Can we say no to them? Maybe we can, but do we feel like we can't say no? Or, what do we, I don't want to use that word afraid. I want to say resistant. Why are we so resistant to saying no? Even when you're in, as women, even when we're in bad relationships, why is it so difficult for us to say no? And I think it's turned inward. That becomes processing what we feel about ourselves and what we're feeling about information that we're giving to other people. Are we going to lose connections? Are we going to lose friends? Are we going to lose relationships? What is it about us?
Yeah.
That's so difficult to say no.
And Leslie, that takes me to where I want to go next, because we're always talking about, when we titled this episode, we were talking about, self-care isn't selfish, and it's almost like we have to make this excuse. We have to give you a reason. We have to tell you, I'm not doing it because, and there's some guilt associated with that. So Laura, I'm going to go to you first on this one. Where does that come from? And everybody can chime in on this one. I'm sure everybody has something to say. Where does that guilt come from, or that desire, as Claudia was just saying, to explain ourselves, right? That if we decide to take care of ourselves, somehow we owe someone an explanation. Where does that come from?
I think part of that is from upbringing and teachings. Part of that is because of how we perceive things and think about it. And I think and it gets me back to thinking about what self-care is. It's not only your behavior and the activities like you're running because you want to be fit, you want to get your health in line, but it's also about how you feel about yourself. It's about how you think about yourself. And I like to also take a different approach related to self-care and selfishness. And I like to challenge my clients with this because it's really related to your mindset in the story you tell yourself. So oftentimes we think of self-care as something that's for ourselves. It's bigger than that. What if we looked at self-care as something that we're saying yes to ourselves, and it's a win-win for the other person? For instance, if you had a child and they're learning to walk, you would not continuously pick them up and keep helping them when they're learning to walk, because they have to grow those muscles. So when we're continuously saying yes to a person we need to say no to, you're actually hurting them. So the best thing that you can do in that situation is say no. That's the kindest thing. And it's the story that we tell ourselves about what is self-care and what is selfish. Now I'm going to give an example of selfishness. Oftentimes we think of self-care as for us again and not for the other person. But in terms of selfishness, we think of that something that we're holding back from that other person. I would also say selfishness can relate to the other person, but it also relates to you. How are you neglecting yourself and being selfish to you with the way you think, feel, behave, and act? So it's a bigger conversation, and we typically put that kind of in one box and look at it one way with self-care and selfishness, but it's bigger than that. So we need to shift our mindset and our stories and our behavior related to it.
I love that you said that, Laura, because I guess I I never really thought about it in terms of, am I being selfish to myself, right? We do think about selfishness as an outward thing, something that is for a third party, right? Or a second party, somebody else, but not related to us. I love that you just said that, because I really had not thought about that in that way. So thanks for that reframing too. Paulette, what do you have to say about that? About the guilt and the shame that comes with us, trying to take care of ourselves or putting ourselves first.
Some of it is some people are people pleasers, and so when you become a people pleaser, you're back in that mode of trying to take care of everybody else instead of taking care of yourself. Some people are guilted, allow themselves to be guilted into taking care of others and not being able to say no. And it's like I just said earlier, if you're not 100%, you can't show up 100%. And so that's the thing to keep at the forefront of your mind. How, if I'm not taking care of me, then there's something missing. And so then I can't give what those people that do need from me, whatever it is they need to me, I may not have that to be able to give because I'm not taking care of me and showing up fully, totally, authentically, and being totally present and those things and those activities that I need to be present for. And when I mean present, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Oh, no, I was going to say, when I mean present, I don't mean just physically present. I mean mentally, spiritually, the whole package. And that's the foundation of my practice, is living a balanced life mentally, physically, spiritually. And so, I mean, the whole showing up in the way that you're truly and authentically you all the time.
So Natasha put in the chat, she said, this sounds like the bucket and dipper principle. Does anybody know what the bucket and dipper principle is? No? So we're gonna have to have Natasha come on and tell us what the bucket and let me see where she is on here if I can pull her up. Natasha, I'm going to unmute you. Hold on one second. Let me
speaking
unmute her.
to me, Paulette.
Okay, Natasha, are you on? Okay, so tell us what you mean by the bucket and dipper principle.
Okay, so I read a book a long time ago. I can't even remember the name of it, but he talked about this principle of the bucket and the dipper. So we all have a proverbial bucket. Like our life, our body is the bucket that we have, we have things that fill it up, like our, whatever it is you do for yourself that fills you up, whether that's your career, your family, yoga, jogging, whatever. So you fill it up. And then as we go along our day or we go along our life, people, things, situation, experiences dip from it. And so sometimes we are our own bucket dippers when we don't take care of ourselves, because those things that we're doing that help fill the bucket, we have to keep doing that in order to keep the bucket full, so that when others do come, like you guys were saying, we can show up as our whole selves and give our best. So that's the principle of the bucket and the dipper.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And we're all like, yeah, because we didn't know anything about that. So thank you. See this, and that's why I love having these conversations, because you learn so much. I have been used to being interviewed by other people or training other people. And when I started coaching with my coach, Shanda Sumter, and we had to do the summits, I found so much joy in having conversations with the 18 women that I interviewed, because you just learn so much about so many things that you've never heard about. I mean, I got to interview women who live in South Africa, right? So that was amazing. But going back to our topic about self-care isn't selfish. So we're talking about where this guilt comes from, right? And we know that we really should try to suppress that guilt. And Paulette, I saw that you raised your hand, so I'm going to come to you in a second. What I want to know, in addition to whatever you're going to say, what I want to know is, we realize that we have this guilt. What are the things that we can do to overcome that? So that we do engage in self-care. But Paula, I'll go to you, and then Laura has her hand raised too. So Paula, Laura, Leslie.
Okay, because when we talk about that guilt, again, that guilt can come from many different things. Someone that doesn't feel good about themselves, and so they look for validation in other people, which then can also turn into fear of rejection. That if I say no, this person won't accept me for who I am. Low self-esteem can be playing a role into it. And so it really depends on the level of difficulty that you have saying no. Some people, it's not a big issue, and for others, it's a major problem. And so it depends on where you fall in that scale of being able, do you accept yourself? Are you looking for validation? Are you afraid of rejection? Are you looking for love? Are you trying to find love through through doing for others and pouring out? Are you looking for people for gratitude, for people to high you and hold you in high reverence if you are constantly out there doing things? In other words, what's your motivation for not being able to say no and always doing and overextending yourself? What's your motivation for doing that? And if you can answer that question, what's your motivation for, then you'll find the root cause. And sometimes, like Dr. Leslie's already mentioned, therapy may be your avenue to finding those answers. I mean, of course, because I'm a mental health therapist, then I'm going to advocate for that. But therapy may be your avenue for figuring that out. And so those are things that to keep in mind. What is your motivation? Why can't you say no? Or why do you feel guilty when you say no? What's the motivation behind that?
Thank you, Paulette, for adding that. Laura, go ahead. I know that you had something you wanted to say.
Well, and touching off this, and I'm going to refer to Dr. Leslie, or Paulette definitely could address this as well. But what comes to mind for me also is attachment theory. Mm-hmm. And that may be one of the reasons why people aren't saying no or feeling guilty, or that you have to prove yourself or overextend yourself. So if one of you could touch on attachment theory, that would be great. Thank you.
Leslie, I know that you had something. Did you want to touch on that?
Yeah. So attachment theory, in theory that, our needs were unmet as children. We go through life trying to look.
We can't hear you, Leslie.
Sorry. So basically our needs as children are unmet. So with our attachment figures. So when we going through, rearing and going up through life, we search for our needs to be met in other places, right? So having a difficult time saying no could be like, Paulette, I think were you that said, being, wanting to be loved in some way or not wanting to be rejected, right? Because I need my needs to be met through, saying yes, 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 and caring for other people, right? Sometimes you see that in trauma and other, concerns. Does that answer your question, Laura?
Well, I just thought it would be great to touch upon it. Yeah, I was aware of it because of my background, but Kelly was asking one of the reasons, and I think this theory does address some of the issues related to it. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. When we talk about not being able to say no, we can throw out theory after theory behind it, but I think that internally we internalize it with ourselves, right? We have to understand why we have that difficulty. What I was going to say is that, when you say, is self-care selfish? To me, that implies that someone is being neglected. Is self-care selfish? To me, that implies, is someone being neglected? It doesn't mean, when I ask if self-care is selfish, I don't think that I'm in that realm. It's like someone else. So who's being neglected? Is it a spouse? Is it children? Is it work? Will work be neglected if you engage in self-care? Who's going to be neglected? And being able to have open dialogue. I'm a big person for normalizing experiences, and I think that's what we all are doing here. We're normalizing each other's experiences with this topic. But being able to create open dialogue around, why would self-care be selfish? I think that I'm entitled, right? Being able to restructure that mindset by creating a calendar of daily events and making it a routine by putting yourself on that calendar for 10 minutes a day, right? And then making it consistent, right? I think that we are entitled to self-care, but we don't know that.
Yeah.
We're so busy doing other stuff. We don't know that. But so to answer that question, is self-care selfish? I'm going to just come out straight out and say no. Why is it selfish? No. Create that dialogue in your family if you think somebody is neglected, and figure out a way that all of you guys can engage in self-care.
Yeah. And Lisa Carper was saying, who's on there, and Lisa, I'm going to come to you in 1 second. She said, especially now in the times of COVID, when human interaction is so much more valued, I think we're less likely to say no, which is true, right? Because we're craving that kind of connection. And I agree with you, Leslie. Self-care is not selfish. And so, that's why we had that title. Self-care isn't selfish. But going back to what Laura said, I think if we really think about when we hear the word selfish in relation to self-care, who is that person really saying you're being selfish to, right? Because then it's about, if they're thinking that you're being selfish to them, they've made it about them. So they're not caring about you. You have to care about you. So when she says, when you don't say no, and when you go and do these things that you don't really want to do, the person who you're being selfish to is you. And why would we do that? And so I still want to, I want to come back to, at least I'm going to call on you. I know that you have something to jump in on here, but I also really want to go back to, how do we move past the guilt? Because I think that is something that really hampers women from engaging in self-care. How do we move? We know, right, that it's not selfish. We know that it's something that is positive for us and could negatively impact our mental health, our physical health. So how do we move past that guilt, so that when we're doing it, we feel good about it? Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so kind of piggybacking on that, and a bit backwards, where you asked the question, what it is about women that actually have this conversation for self-care and guilt. And I think that, like, I can't speak, I'm not a man, but do men have this conversation? Like, do men have this conversation about having self-care and having guilt about taking care of themselves? I'm going to venture to say nowhere near to the degree as women, I would think. But I think if you look at the social conversation of what it is to be a woman, we're living in an age where technology is moving fast, where women are, engaged in activities at much greater levels in terms of working outside of the home, running their own businesses, being in charge of finances, things that for a lot of us just seem like normal every day. But, it's not that far away. In the 1970s, women could not have credit cards. They could not have their own name. They could not have a bank account without their husband. So when you ask about this conversation for guilt, there's a lot of untraining that that we're putting a demand on ourselves to just step over in the last 30 years, as if like, what do you mean? Why are you guilty? Because up until 1970, I actually had to have permission to have my own bank account. So there's just a lot of inherent hereditary training, this conversation that women are the nurturers, that they're just part of the subconscious way of that we live life. And how we get over the guilt is to kind of have these conversations where we unpack these subconscious ways of being, so that we can actually look and face and go, oh, you know what? That conversation really doesn't serve how we live life in this new 21st century. Oh, this conversation is not going to support the things that I'm up to as a woman, as a mom, as a sister, as a parent, as a business owner, as someone who's taking care of my newborn child, as well as taking care of my elder parents. So there's just so much demand that has happened in this last 30 years. And we're not actually taking on facing those conversations. We're just kind of going, yeah, and why aren't we just all badass? But there's something to being a badass, which means that you literally have to look at what it means to be a woman in the 21st century, and to actually declare that some of these conversations that we have just ignored really don't work, and then actually to vocalize that they don't work, to inform people and educate people that they don't work, and then stand in our power and move forward from there.
Yep, stand in your power. All about standing in your power and unleashing that badassery. Chanel, I want to bring you into this. How do we move past the guilt? And then how do we, let me stick with that first. What are things that we can do to move past the guilt?
Yeah, I think from like a daily practical standpoint, because when we talk about like in theory, moving past the guilt, like all that sounds great on paper, but like when you are, in your home, your husband's working from home now, kids running around that you're trying to keep an eye on, virtual learning, you're trying to run a business, like on paper, all of that sounds great. And so I find that you really have to manage expectations, because I think that some of the guilt comes from us, but some of it comes because we haven't communicated properly. And I think Dr. Leslie touched on that just a little bit about the communication piece of it. Really managing expectations with the people that are around us on why I'm saying no. So yes, I would love to take a look at your homework, but right now, no, because I have a meeting that I'm about to jump into. And that guilt comes from when you're, you look at your kid's face and they're like, oh, mommy's not going to do this, or, whatever. But if you can manage expectations and really communicate, I think that helps a lot from like your day-to-day standpoint. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying no forever. It just means no right now. No, I'm not doing it right in this moment, but yes, we can do something about that later. And just really just communicating with the key players around you, so that guilt, because personally, I feel more guilt from the people saying no to the people that I live with, the people that I care from the most. It's easy to say no to strangers, but it's really difficult to say no to the people that you're with every day. You know what I mean? So I think just really just kind of like managing expectations, being very, communicating, so that you're all on the same page as to what's going on. Here's why I'm saying no. Here's why I'm distant. But oh, by the way, I am taking 15 minutes for myself, versus taking time to do what you need to do.
That's awesome. And everyone who is watching us live on Zoom, let us know if you have any questions. I'm going to check really quickly on my page to see if anybody on Facebook has any questions. There are lots of comments on here, y'all. So let's see. We're taught to put others first before yourself by your parents. If I'm not 100%, I can't give 100%. Wonderful reminder, Paulette. Somebody says, such a great conversation. Good point, Dr. Leslie, that I should look inward for why it's difficult to say no. I think because women tend to be nurturers, we will make time for others even when we don't have the time. That's true. Absolutely true. And we have a male who's watching, Marvin Perry. Hey, Marvin, I'm glad that you're joining us. And Tanya is the one who's chiming in on a lot of those responses. Tanya Williams. I enjoy seeing women of power help other women. This is called women empowerment. I co-chair a women's empowerment group for 8 years, and I realize the power of a complete woman. Tanya also says, engaging in self-care right now as I unwind at the end of a busy work week, feet up and enjoying a glass of wine. Yep, go ahead, girl. And Donna St. Louis says, boss. So if anybody has any questions or you want to chime in, let us know, because even though you are not on video, if you're on Zoom, we can unmute you so that you can talk to us. So as we're going forward, and I said, I want to talk about things that are practical. What are the things that people can actually do? So we've talked about what self-care isn't, why it isn't selfish, why it's important to our success, why it's important to our physical health, our mental health. So now let's talk about what are the specific things. And I want you to talk about, you can talk about them generally, but I want you to also share with our audience, what are some of the things that you do personally for self-care? And I'll start with Lisa.
So one of the things that brought it really home to me is back in the day, before all of the iPhones and everything, there was this thing called the Palm Pilot. It was like the first technology thing where you could schedule, in technology, your whole, week. And the thing I loved about the Palm Pilot is that you could color code all of these activities that you were doing. So I had color coded everything, except for when I looked at the Palm Pilot, my particular color was green. My daughter was blue. Work was orange, this training things that I was doing was pink. And when I looked at the Palm Pilot, week after week after week, I could not find blue to save my life. And so what I really got from that is that my schedule was filled with what I call IOUs. I owe you my time for this. I owe you my time for that. There wasn't really a lot of blank space. And so I literally had to begin to train myself to schedule in to my calendar what I call UOUs. Like I would block time just for me, and I wouldn't tell people what it's for. Can I meet as no, and I'd look at no, I'm not available, and then I would offer them another time. And it's in that way of learning to block UOU time into my calendar that I began to get some space to just do whatever I wanted to. I didn't even have a reason for the time. I just blocked the time, and I would block time actually because I was working as a financial executive. So I was at work, like I would block like from 1 to 3. I was not available for meetings between 1 and 3. What are you doing? It doesn't matter. They go on Outlook. They can't schedule me because I'm blocked. So you just have to learn to put in these UOU times. The other thing I did was I literally took a day that was just for me. Like I just declared that this day of the week belonged to me, for me to do whatever it is I wanted to do or to do absolutely nothing. If I want to stay in my pajamas the whole day, that's what I would do. And my daughter learned that that was my day, so that when her little friends would call for, can I do this or can I do that? I have to check with my mom because that's her day. And I don't know, so, you have to learn to give yourself that grace of saying that you owe you the time for you to do nothing or anything that it is you want to do. And it saves you from having to explain that. The other thing that it allows you to do is that it lets you to start building integrity with your word. so that if you promise somebody that you're going to be available at a certain time and you're available at that time, then they learn to trust you. So they don't keep coming back to you and going, well, what about now? Well, what about now? Well, what about now? No, because you told them that you're going to be available at that time. And then you show up at that time, they'll learn to start trusting you. And you'll find out that a lot of this friction that's happening in your schedule starts to dissipate because people are not second guessing, well, does she really mean she's going to be available at that time? No, they'll just trust that you are. So those are some practical things that I would suggest.
Excellent. Geraldine, what about you?
I think for me, it's interesting because I don't have the problem feeling guilty. I try to schedule time for me, especially now at this point in time in my life. I do schedule time for me, but I also try to balance. Sometimes I don't say no to other people because sometimes I have to realize that there will be times when I'm going to expect things from other people, and it may not be convenient for them, but I may need their help. And sometimes people may need my help. So sometimes I think I have to actually sit down and think, is it best for me to do it? Is it best for me to say no? Is it best for me to say later, but to balance it and not just always be so quick to say no? But I definitely schedule time for myself that I hold to that time.
Yeah. Paulette? You're on mute. Okay.
Okay. One of the most important things is boundaries. You know, what are your boundaries with people, and do you hold yourself accountable to those boundaries, and then do you hold others to those boundaries? I start my morning off with prayer. That's my spiritual aspect of what I do. Every morning I start off with prayer. I have a playlist. I have different playlists of music. I love to dance and sing, and not that I can sing, but I love to dance and sing and music. And so I have playlists already made up for depending on what mood I'm in, that I may pop in if I need something, some pick me up music. I have my playlist of pick me up music. Those are things I like to do. I belong to a book club. I have ladies that, I love to read. Another thing is a bath. I love taking a hot bath with a cup or two of Epsom salt and 5 to 10 drops of lavender. And let me tell you, the stress just melts away when you're doing that. Day to day, I do some of the meditation or the visualization, or sometimes the deep breathing for myself, especially if I have a difficult client that after a session, and I make sure that I block out, I give myself time in between sessions when I'm seeing clients, as I schedule clients. So those are just some of the things. Family and friends, I love to laugh. So I have friends that I can call to. And it's important for you to have a support group. Who do you call when you're stressed, or when you're not, you're feeling down, or you just want to laugh? I have girlfriends that I know that if I call them, they're good for a laugh. So, knowing who those friends are and when and where, they can reach out, and how they serve and how they work in your life. Those are just, I don't want to take up the whole panel because I can go on for days, but those are just a few of the things that I do.
So Paulette, there's a question for you. Don't you find it harder to have boundaries with your family, your child? Tanya says she does.
I'm not sure what you mean by do I find it harder?
Harder to set boundaries when you're talking about your children or your family?
Oh, absolutely. It's harder, but it's necessary. And I think it's even more necessary to have boundaries with my family and especially my youngest. I've had to reestablish boundaries with him. I have a 25-year-old who thinks that I should be available to him at the drop of the dime. If he calls me, I'm supposed to pick up regardless.
I have a 29-year-old, yes.
Yeah, so I had to reestablish boundaries with him because he had called me back to back. So I just had to reestablish my boundaries with him and look, stop calling me like that. I'm thinking there's an emergency, So absolutely, I think family is the hardest to establish those boundaries, which is why it's most important to establish those boundaries with your family and hold them to it and let them know ahead of time. I live in DC area, and it's just me, and my oldest son lives in the area. Most of my other family is in Missouri or Georgia or whatever. And so when they call, if they can't reach me if I don't answer within a reasonable amount of time, what they consider a reasonable amount of time, they'll blow my phone up and they're calling my son, "Where's your mother? Have you heard from her?" I'm like, oh my God. So now I text when I'm having me time. I'll just send out a group text, shutting off my phone. Call you when I'm done. So
That's a good idea. That's a good idea because they'll
So-
get you through a wellness check.
Yep, there you go. So there's that. So that's a way for me to help them help me manage those boundaries. So those
I
kind of,
love
but
that.
absolutely, family is the most important, the hardest and the most important.
That's perfect. Thank you. Claudia, what do you do for self-care?
I think Chanel touched on it earlier, managing expectations, and not just of what other people think of me, but what I think of people's expectation of me. So sometimes we have this whole conversation in our head that necessarily isn't what the other person is expecting, but yet we've created this own expectation of what their expectation is. So having really clear communication, and one of the things that I love to do, if you think about the Native American Indian culture, they have a dream catcher that they hang, traditionally hung up over their beds. And at night it would catch all the bad stuff, and it would burn off in the morning sunlight. So I developed a habit of going through my day at night. And if a conversation stuck out, like I talked to that person and this didn't feel good, or I'm still thinking about that comment, right? Because maybe I got a story going on that doesn't really exist because the other person's really, that's not what they meant. And so I'll jot those things down so that when I go to bed at night, I can actually sleep. And then in the morning, if it's still bothering me, that's the first thing that I do. I don't call them at 6 a.m., obviously, if they're not morning people, but, and then I have that uncomfortable conversation and I say, hey, when we talked about this, I heard this, and this is what I was thinking, is that kind of true? And so just bringing light to the situation. And so that helps me manage. Another thing that I do is I have done 2 books that I absolutely love. So I'm just going to throw them out there. One of them is called The Artist's Way, and the other one's called Calling in the One. And a lot of people think, oh, that's about finding love, you're one person. And it's really not. Calling in the One is about really finding yourself and falling in love with you. And through those programs, it's like you do daily activities and they teach you how to take yourself on a date. And it could be as simple as going to the dollar store and buying crazy stickers, or, making a cup of tea, and Dr. Paulette, I cannot sing or dance, but I love both. So
And she loves to dance.
I do.
She
I
loves it.
I love it. And I can't do either one.
So do I.
Yeah. Like I've been threatened to be thrown out of church because I sing so bad, but that's a whole nother story. So in that book, in those books that I'm talking about, they give you techniques to do, and you can figure out what stuck, but what really stuck and has made a huge difference in my life and my self-care. And I can tell when I don't do it. I journal every single day. So I light a candle. My method is I call them Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. That's my belief system. I light the candle. I sit in silence. I love sitting out in nature. There ain't nothing more beautiful than watching the perfect color coordination of nature for me. And I just sit there and I free write, and I free my all that conversation, because my head is very busy all the time. And so it really is like, it's like 6 lanes of traffic and everybody's speeding at 115 miles per hour. And so if I don't journal, I notice the impact in my sleep because I didn't do the mind dump, right? And then sometimes while I'm journaling, I get answers to my own questions. So I love the doctors on the panel. And because of you, I've done therapy. So I'm completely with creating mental health awareness. I love it. And I have minimized the need because my journal helps me through a lot of stuff now. So I think journaling, cup of tea, singing and dancing, all those things.
That's awesome. Leslie.
Hi. So absolutely. So, one thing for me, I have to, and I wrote down, I think when we think about self-care, we have to choose realistic measures, realistic tools, because I think that, for me at least, I'm not going to say I'm going to go to the gym because then I'll fall through and then I get down on myself. So I think that if you don't have realistic tools for self-care, then it opens up the door for like low mood, depression, guilt, and, turn inward. So I have to have realistic, something that I'm going to do. One thing I love to do is just getting in my car driving every weekend.
Just do what, Leslie? It's hard to hear. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Get in my car and drive.
Oh.
Every weekend, I just get in my car and drive somewhere. I know that we're social distancing. Driving doesn't mean that you have to be in front of somebody's face, right? But I get in my car and drive because that gives me peace. Something else that I'm into is mindfulness. I'm big on mindfulness. It helps me sleep. When I get anxious and when I get stressed, I can't sleep. And I know when I'm stressed because I cannot sleep. So mindfulness meditation is good for me. And driving and my mental health talk, that's bringing me joy. Being able to immerse myself into that is bringing me happiness, joy. So those are things that I'm doing right now. But realistically, I do a lot of mindfulness meditation.
That's awesome too. And yes, you have really flourished in doing your shows on Facebook, and love to see it. Love to see it. Miss Chanel, what do you do?
Yes, I do a number of things. Some things similar to what some of the other ladies have added. I like to sing. I'm not the best singer, but I do like to sing. Dancing. I put myself on the calendar at least a couple of times a month, where it might be just an hour, it might be 4 hours, and it may be that I'm actually having an appointment, but it could be that I just want to sleep in that day or do laundry or just lay in the bed and play on my phone. But the biggest thing for me, we talk about this a lot with business in terms of knowing what your strengths are and then outsourcing. But I outsource things in my daily family life all the time. So if I'm having a long week, stressful week, busy week, and I don't want to cook, then I don't. You know what I mean? I ordered DoorDash. I haven't been to the grocery store in a couple of weeks just because of the way that our family has flow. I have done Instacart and had grocery delivery. If I notice that, things are getting put off, then I incorporate because I have teenagers. So I consider us a team. And so why would I pay for, certain things when you guys can clean the bathrooms, when you guys can do the vacuuming? And just being able to outsource some things that make my family life, my household life run a lot smoother, in addition to looking at tasks in my business that stress me out, where I can outsource those tasks as well. And then also not just putting in, because I think a lot of times with COVID makes us think that we're having family time, but we may not actually be having family time. We're just all in the house at the same time. So we make sure that we put family time, whether it's, just being silly and watching a movie, popcorn on a Friday night, and actually having quality family time with us all in the room. Because COVID will make you think that you're spending time with your family, but you're really not. You're just all in the same house, but not actually spending quality time. So I make sure that not only am I putting myself on the calendar, but we do family time stuff as well.
I love that. Laura D. Harver, what do you do?
I do a lot of the things that the ladies shared already. I do breathing, but I do that throughout the day. I do that in the morning intentionally. I write poetry, and I'll share a poem shortly. But one of the things that was mentioned was having the support around you. One of the things that we all have in common is that we're women that are involved and investors in Ladies Who Leverage. And in Ladies Who Leverage, which is a Facebook group, and we also meet at other times monthly and other times where we get support. It's an opportunity to ask for help and get help where you need it. It's also a place where we're supported when we need to be celebrated. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to be celebrated. And in the Ladies Who Leverage space, we can do that. And we're encouraged to celebrate our wins. And that's something that I believe in, that we encourage each other to not harp on our failures or our challenges, but to learn and get a takeaway from that. So we help to support one another and push each other when we need to. And we also cheerlead for one another and encourage each other to get out of our own ways. So I think Ladies Who Leverage is a big support, definitely for me and for a lot of women that I've talked to that are involved in Ladies Who Leverage. So I do want to give a shout out to you, Kelly, and for your work there, because it is a support. When even your sister Lisa talked about, you know, we have these different things that we grew up with, and, you know, women couldn't own property. They couldn't do that. And Ladies Who Leverage is a group of women who own their badassery, and they walk in boldness in their individual life, in their organization. So that's something that I'm a part of. Everyone here is a part of, and I encourage you to be a part of that too. So I did want to take a moment to say that. Another thing that I do is that I celebrate all of me. So when you think in terms of your strengths, yes, let's acknowledge our strengths, but let's acknowledge those other things that may seem a little interesting. And there's that saying that with lemons, you make lemonade. And I think of onions, you make French onion soup. So I'm going to share this brief poem from my book, Exposed to Healing. And this is called More Than That. More than a piece of poultry or seasoned beef, not for you to just take one bite to chew, but I'm made of vegetables from the bottom and the top. I have vegetables inside of me too. Onions and potatoes and carrots and tomatoes, and yes, beans too. I'm more than that. I'm more like a colorful and hearty stew.
I love it. I love it. I love it. See, where there's so many talents, right? We have the dancers, we have the almost singers, we have the poets, we have the writers. So for me, I'm a workaholic. I'm a night owl. So I like to stay up late at night and work and just keep working. And part of that comes from my years of being a trial attorney. And so when I started last year on the journey of being a full-time entrepreneur, I took all of those bad habits into what I'm doing now. And I read Core Calling, which is by Shanda Sumter. So you'll hear me talk about her a lot because she has, her business model is like the freedom model, and she takes a lot of time off. She talks to you about like having flex time. And so when I read her book, she talked about, you know, how she I think she takes a month off or something. It's something like that, or a week, a week, a month. But she has a lot of flex time. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, I need flex time. I want flex time. So I had, when I set up my calendar as an entrepreneur, I had Fridays where I would work from, like, nobody could schedule anything after 2:00 on a Friday. And so I read that book and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to move it to like 12. Nobody can schedule till after 12. And then I was like, no, they just can't schedule on my calendar on Friday, right? So I took Fridays off my calendar and I was like, I'm taking Friday off my calendar. Oh my God. And then, so then people would call and, you know, they want to schedule something. And I still at times have to work through like, no, they don't get to schedule on my calendar on Friday. I'm my own boss and I can say, I don't want to do that on a Friday. I just don't. And then, so the other day, then I decided, so I launched the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, and I said, okay, on Mondays is when I'm going to do my interviews. That's when I'll do the interviews and work on the podcast. So guess what? Unless you're coming on a podcast, you can't schedule on my calendar on Mondays. So now my calendar is Tuesday through Thursday, right? And somehow all the stuff gets done, right? Because people fit into the box that you've created, right? And so, and I still talk to myself about it, but at least I have those boundaries and I can decide. So if I decide I want to do something on a Friday, I'll do it. If I decide I want to do something on a Monday, I'll do it. You don't get to put stuff on my calendar. And then the other thing that I've done recently, and it's because I had my blood pressure taken the other day, was really high, which I've never had high blood pressure. And I was like, no, you have got to exercise, because I sit a lot for work, right? I just sit here all day. I'm on the computer. I'm training on the computer. And so Clubhouse, which so many of us are on Clubhouse, I decided that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I would get myself out of bed. They all know, everybody here knows I'm not a morning person, but I have forced myself to say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to mix business and my health. And so Mondays, Wednesday, Friday, 7:45 a.m. Let's walk, talk, and connect. And it's been awesome. So I've done it this whole week, and I also started going to CrossFit. And for those of you who know me, know that I used to compete in fitness bikini competitions. I actually know what I'm supposed to do. That's probably why I don't do it, because I know exactly what it takes to get to where I want to be as far as exercise. But those are the things that I've done. So I have really taken hold of my calendar, and I have taken hold of, you need to get up and do something, walk, go to the gym, or do something. So, I think you can see from what everyone is saying, like there's like a common thread about just putting yourself, minding your calendar, right? Because our calendar is how people get to us. Our calendar is how people get to impact our day and our life. And so when we create, so I created the wall around my calendar, and my calendar is electronic. So you go on there, you'll see there, you can't get to it. You can't get to Monday unless you have a special access to that calendar, and you can't get to Friday, right? So all the things that we talked about with regards to boundaries. So if anybody has any questions, I know there was a couple comments. Somebody says, Sandy Zanino said, oh my God, this scheduling actual time for me in my calendar, simple and perfect. Thank you. Tanya said, you. Love that, Lisa. Tan said, so true. Love LWL. So before we wrap up, if anyone who's watching on Facebook who has any questions, please tell us if you have any questions. If you are in the live audience with us on Zoom, if you want to raise your hand, or if you want to come off mute, just let us know and we'll let you come in. But before we go, I'm going to have everyone go around and just give your final thoughts around this whole topic of self-care not being selfish. Go ahead, Lisa.
So my final thoughts is, just in listening to what everyone has said today, my takeaway around self-care is that there's really 4 R's. Usually we talk about R&R, which is rest and relaxation, but there's also 2 other R's. So there's rest, relaxation, rewards, and rituals. And I think that if we, when we wake up during the day with that in mind, and as Claudia was saying, before we go to bed, reviewing that so that we can actually get real rest when we are sleeping. I think just focusing on those 4 R's will go a long way to helping us with our self-care.
Thank you. I think that's really, you are so, okay. So y'all listen, this brain over here, this brain, the one that just opened the mouth. Okay. All right, I'm just gonna let you. If you see, when you see me all of a sudden tell you I'm getting ready to do this, or I have gotten very clear about this, that means that I have had a conversation with this woman over here, and she has gotten me very, very clear. So any business, anything that I've had, she is the person behind me. Like, she is the engine that pushes when I am like, I don't know what I'm talking. I'm like in this space. I don't know. And she'll tell me all these things. And then she'll say to me, okay, Laura's like this with me too. Okay, I can hear that you're done now. Because I'll get to a space where I'm like no longer communicating. I am no longer listening almost. She'll say, okay, I know that you're done now, so I'll just leave you, because I know in 3 days you'll come back, or maybe tomorrow, and you'll tell me, okay, this is what I'm getting ready to do. But it's all because of her. So have to give her that credit and that due. So Miss Geraldine, what are your last thoughts?
Probably, as many people have talked about, that just remembering how important it is to take care of ourselves. But one of my biggest takeaways in listening to the ladies on the panel, and I can't remember who said it, I think it was Dr. Leslie, but I'm not sure, and that's the importance of sleep, because that's when we heal. And I think that when we don't take care of ourselves, we actually can become physically ill. because we're unable to sleep and because we're unable to nurture ourselves the way that we actually need it. So I definitely have a tendency to stay up late at night, like you talked about, Kelly. But now I just when I heard that, I'm like, you know what? That's going to be my priority. I'm going to set that as a priority to make sure that I go to bed at a decent time so that I am able to heal when I am under a lot of stress. So thank you, whoever
You're
made
welcome.
that. But thank you. This was really great.
You're welcome. Miss Paulette, what about you?
Something I saw on Facebook the other day, I hope I say this right. If you don't make time for yourself, your body will make time for your illness. It's just that simple. It's so important that we remember to incorporate self-care into our daily activities. And what my biggest takeaway from this is that you need to have a plan. You know, how are you going to structure your day, your week, your month, year, so to ensure that you're incorporating even those small things that all the panels, tips that the panel have given, to make sure that you're doing something to take that mental break, that physical break, getting the sleep that you need. All of those things need to be a part of your plan. Just like you make a business plan for your business, make a business plan for self-care.
Yeah, I agree. Miss Claudia.
I think once I got really clear on my boundaries of what I wanted in my life, and then I got good at vocalizing what my expectations were to other people of those boundaries, and then it was easier for me to carve out time in my schedule. But for me, my biggest takeaway was learning that everything is renegotiable. And as you brilliantly showed us, right? You talked about your Friday calendar and when you had it at 2, right? And then you backed it up to 12. And it was like, well, no, I just don't want to do Fridays, right? And so that's like a perfect example of like, everything's renegotiable. Even if we say yes, it's renegotiable with maybe an uncomfortable conversation, but so you can make a decision and then you can renegotiate it if it's not working for you or if there's a better something out there for you. So that would be my final thoughts.
Thank you. Leslie?
Have me.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I just want to say my phone keeps ringing. I have it on Do Not Disturb. These days iPhones. See, I lost my train of thought.
That's
yeah,
all right.
Exactly. You know, listen, it all boils down to our bodies are like cars, right? Our bodies need fuel and needs to be taken care of. And if we don't take care of them, they're going to break down. And let me tell you, if they break down, you're no good to work. You can't, it's going to interfere with production, productivity. It's going to interfere with health. Your body breaks down when you're stressed, right? So health, a lot of things result from not taking care of your bodies and not engaging in self-care. Whatever that self-care is, you choose, right? Whatever it is, whatever works for you, choose it, right? But the idea is being able to engage in something that makes you happy and makes you even happy if it's just for a moment, right? Makes you happy in that it potentially improves the quality of your life, right? I think that our life, we don't know when we're going to leave this earth, but I think that we have control over, potentially how long we stay on this earth, right? By taking care of ourselves, whether that means eating healthy. Let me tell you guys, I don't eat healthy, but I eat unhealthy, like on Fridays, right? But if it means eating healthy, if it means spending time with your family, whatever it means, just think of something to do it. You can make time for anything else. So why can't you put 10 minutes out of your schedule a day in that calendar that I talked to you guys about working on every single day, right? Why can't you put 10 minutes in there just to step away and breathe?
Yeah, absolutely. Miss Chanel.
Yeah, this was a great conversation, and I think it's one that we should continue to have, even if it's not in a forum like this, but just making sure that we, like Dr. Leslie said, incorporate it every day. So a couple of takeaways that I have is one, that no is a complete sentence, and that it is okay to say no, but we should be continuously saying no to negativity, to being overworked, to being overwhelmed. And sometimes we have to say no to ourselves, whether it's bad habits, saying no to procrastination, And then learning that saying no is a yes to something else and a yes to something that I really need to do or is a part of my value system. So yeah, this was a great conversation.
Excellent. Laura.
Self-care, at the bottom line, the end of the day, is for you. It can fuel your success if you let it. And you're in the driver's seat of your own self-care. So develop it. You're worth it.
That's awesome. And we have some comments in Facebook. So Renee says, good points, Claudia Smith Verga. We can renegotiate as needed. Geraldine says, thank you. An important conversation that is easily overlooked. Renee says, such a great reminder to do something that makes you happy and that no is a complete sentence. So we did it, y'all. We did it. So I had this thought that we were going to, at first I was like, we're going to have a town hall. And then I was like, oh, we're going to, thanks to Donna St. Louis, who will be on in one of the Friday events, to helping me come up with the name, What's the Tea? We were brainstorming. But thank you all. Thank you all for being part of Ladies Who Leverage, for being investors in Ladies Who Leverage, who just see my vision. Sometimes I'm crazy and I'm always thinking of something, but it's always to elevate other women. It's always to empower you. It's always to create influence and impact. That is my whole goal behind Ladies Who Leverage, is to push us forward, to put us out into the limelight, and for people to see and to hear. Y'all are some amazing, the women in Ladies Who Leverage, y'all are amazing. The backgrounds of the women who are in Ladies Who Leverage, the skill set of the women who Ladies Who Leverage is unmatched by anyone, right? And we all work together. And so this is just one of those things. Having this What's the Tea series, when I put it out there, everybody was like, yes, 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 right? And so thank you all again for participating. Thank you for all of the insight that you shared today. As I said earlier, Ladies Who Leverage is a global women's community. We have women from all over the world who are a part of Ladies Who Leverage. We are housed on Facebook. It's called the Facebook group, but we are so much more than that. We are really a movement. We are women who are doing things in the world to make a positive impact, to create influence. And obviously we're all business women, or we work in some companies, so it's about income too. But whenever you create influence and impact, the income will come to you. So if you are a woman who is an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, a woman who's in transition, you're not sure if you want to stay in corporate or if you want to be a full-time entrepreneur, you just still want to do both, and you are about taking action and being engaged and participating, then we would love for you to come and join us in Ladies Who Leverage. You can easily find us on Facebook, Ladies Who Leverage, or you can go to Team LWL or ladieswholeverage.club, whichever you want to go to. It's really easy. Ladies Who Leverage, come join us on Facebook. That's where we are. We do all kinds of events throughout the month. March is like jam-packed. March 12th, 19th, and 26th are the other What's the Tea episodes, 6 p.m. Eastern. Again, you can join us live in studio by going to thetea.live, and you can register for all of them on that page. You can also learn more about the ladies. Some of them have clickable links, so you can learn more about them there. If you come into our group, you'll also learn about them in there. And so the other thing, my Ladies Who Leverage podcast, please go subscribe to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. You'll see over the time, it's a new podcast, and I'm very excited about it. And what we will be doing is elevating women and sharing their stories. I think it's important for you to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, and understand the journeys that took us to where we brought us to where we are as being successful women. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I am overjoyed at how well this went, and I cannot wait to see what we do on the 12th, the 19th, and the 26th. So go to TEA facebook.live and join us again. And let me see, in Facebook, yay, y'all rock. This was so important. Appreciate all of you. That's from Renee. Geraldine, you're truly a visionary. Kelly, thank you. Renee says, facts, all influence and impact here with LWL. Tanya says, such a great conversation tonight. I definitely was self-caring with you all tonight. Wonderful information, great takeaways. See you next week for another cup of tea. Ladies Who Leverage and What's the Tea. And Michelle Bryan says, awesome. So that's it for tonight, y'all. That's it for What's the Tea? Real women, real conversations. Good night.